For years, Moscow felt untouchable, a distant command center far removed from the chaos of war. Explosions belonged to other cities, other people. But on the night of May 17th, that illusion shattered. The sky above Russia's capital lit up with fire as hundreds of Ukrainian drones pushed through one of the most heavily defended airspaces on Earth. Air raid sirens echoed through neighborhoods that had never heard them before. Airports went dark. Oil facilities burned. And for the first time in this war, millions of Russians watched the conflict arrive at their own doorstep in real time. But this wasn't just another strike. It was coordinated, calculated, strategic, because behind the explosions, something far more dangerous was unfolding, something that could reshape the balance of this entire war. The question now is no longer if Moscow can be hit again. It's how far this escalation is about to go. The night began like any other: quiet streets, sleeping neighborhoods, a sense of normalcy in a city that had until now been largely shielded from the front lines. And then the sky changed. Wave after wave of drones, nearly 600 by most estimates, approached Moscow in what would become the largest coordinated aerial assault on a capital city in this conflict. This wasn't a random barrage. It was synchronized, overwhelming, and relentless. Residents woke to the sound of explosions, not distant rumbles, but sharp, immediate detonations. Tracer fire streaked across the sky as Russian air defense systems activated in full force. S-400 batteries, Pantsir systems, radar networks, all engaging targets at once. But that was only the beginning, because in modern drone warfare, interception doesn't mean safety. As defenses fired, debris began falling, burning fragments of intercepted drones raining down across residential areas. In some cases, the defense systems themselves became part of the danger. Reports emerged of air defense strikes hitting apartment buildings, turning protection into collateral damage. And this is where the situation became dangerous. Moscow's infrastructure began to buckle under the pressure. Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Russia's busiest airports, shut down almost simultaneously. Over 250 flights were canceled. Aircraft mid-route were forced to turn back. Thousands of passengers were stranded in terminals as the airspace above the capital became a combat zone. Meanwhile, fires erupted across critical industrial sites. Oil refineries burned through the night. Thick black smoke rose over the city's outskirts, visible for miles. By sunrise, the damage was still unfolding. But what truly shook Moscow wasn't just the physical destruction. It was the realization. For 4 years, this war had been something seen on screens, happening in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa. Now it was outside their windows, the same fear, the same chaos, the same uncertainty. And then came the moment nobody expected. While millions searched for information, state television barely acknowledged the attack. Coverage lasted minutes. The focus quickly shifted elsewhere. But on the ground, reality couldn't be hidden. Videos flooded social media. Panic spread faster than the drones themselves. The gap between what people were seeing and what they were being told began to widen. And that gap would prove far more dangerous than the attack itself. What unfolded over Moscow wasn't just a military strike, it was a strategic message, because Ukraine didn't target randomly. Every location hit that night revealed a deeper layer of intent, but the Pentagon and military analysts worldwide had already anticipated this shift. Modern warfare is no longer defined by front lines alone. It's about reach, precision, and the ability to strike the systems that sustain a war machine. And that's exactly what happened here. Key facilities tied to Russia's military-industrial complex were hit in rapid succession. The Elma Technopark and the Angstrom semiconductor plant, both critical to Russia's electronics and microchip production, came under attack. These are not symbolic targets. They are the backbone of modern warfare. Guidance systems, sensors, processors. Without them, missiles don't function the same way. And this is where the escalation becomes strategic. Western sanctions had already restricted Russia's access to advanced microchips. Domestic production sites like these were meant to close that gap. Now, they're under direct threat. At the same time, energy infrastructure was struck. The Moscow oil refinery, just kilometers from the city center, was set ablaze. Fuel depots critical to military logistics were hit. These are the arteries that keep both the civilian economy and the military running. But the most alarming target, the Raduga Design Bureau. This facility is directly linked to the production of cruise missiles like the KH-101, some of the very weapons used in strikes against Ukrainian cities. And that changes everything, because this wasn't just retaliation, it was disruption. Ukraine is no longer focused solely on the battlefield. It's targeting the supply chain behind it: electronics, fuel, missile production, one coordinated strike hitting all three layers at once. But what military analysts noticed next was even more concerning. Russia now faces a dilemma with no easy solution. To defend Moscow, air defense systems must be redeployed inward, away from the front lines. But weakening the front creates vulnerabilities Ukraine can exploit. This is a classic strategic trap. Similar patterns appeared in World War II, when Homeland Defense pulled critical assets away from active combat zones. The result? Openings that shifted the course of war. And today, the same logic applies. Add to that the cost imbalance, cheap drones versus multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles, and the equation becomes even more unstable. One side is scaling production rapidly, the other is burning through expensive defenses just to keep up. And if this trend continues, the idea of a fully secure airspace may no longer exist. The impact of that night didn't stop at explosions or infrastructure damage. It triggered something deeper, something harder to contain: psychological shift. For the first time, Moscow experienced what Ukrainian cities had endured for years: constant threat, sudden taka, uncertainty in the dark. But unlike Ukraine, this was unfamiliar territory for Russia's capital. And that difference matters, because perception shapes stability. But that was only the beginning. As images spread across social media, despite government restrictions, a new narrative began forming: not controlled, not filtered, raw and immediate. Citizens saw burning facilities, grounded flights, and falling debris with their own eyes. And this is where the situation became volatile. Trust began to erode. When official statements say everything is under control, but the skyline tells a different story, the credibility gap grows fast. History has shown this before. Moments when governments lose control of the narrative often become turning points. At the same time, pressure is building across multiple fronts. Economically, every disrupted flight, every damaged refinery, every halted factory adds strain. War is no longer just draining resources at the front, it's bleeding into the core of Russia's economy. Militarily, casualty rates remain high. Reports to tens of thousands lost monthly. Infrastructure is stretched, logistics are under pressure. And then came a subtle but significant shift. Calls for negotiations, once absent, began to reappear in official rhetoric, quiet at first, then more visible, then. But analysts warn, this doesn't signal immediate de-escalation. Instead, it reflects mounting pressure behind the scenes. Because when a capital becomes a target, the stakes change. And Ukraine has already signaled this is not a one-time operation. Long-range strike capabilities are expanding. Production is increasing. Coordination is improving, which leads to an uncomfortable reality. This is not the peak. It's the beginning of a new phase, where distance no longer guarantees safety and the boundaries of war continue to expand. What happened over Moscow on May 17th was more than a drone attack. It was a turning point, a moment where the lines between front lines and home front disappeared, where advanced air defenses were tested and exposed, where the psychological shield protecting a capital city cracked under pressure. But the deeper question remains unresolved. If this level of coordination can reach Moscow today, what happens tomorrow? Will defenses adapt fast enough? Will escalation spiral further? Or is this the beginning of a wider shift in how modern wars are fought and where they are felt? Because one thing is now clear: the war is no longer distant, and the next phase may not just reshape the battlefield, it could redefine the meaning of security itself.